Welcome back to Soul Knowledge. Today we're going to be discussing the Adidas NMD. And I want to ask you, how many of you know what NMD actually stands for? Next major decision? No more drama? Need more data? Well, I've actually asked this question to quite a few of you guys before actually going live with filming. And it seems like when it comes to knowing what that means, the truth is that not many do. So grab your pen and paper as I share with you the next major details on the NMD. Let's get into it. I want to thank you all for all of the support shown to Soul Knowledge in the first 2 episodes. This is the 3rd one, and it's been so good. Thank you for hitting that like button, thank you for hitting subscribe, and for checking us out on these channels. But most importantly, there's been so much community involvement that I want to let you know that I've actually filmed this episode before, but without the original NMD. Walking in the street, I met this cat. I saw him wearing these NMDs. I stopped him, I had a conversation, and he's allowed us to refilm the episode and to use the original as we spoke through it. So to Wing, my man, thank you so much for helping us out with your sneakers. And with a name like Wing, you know his sneakers are fly. Do believe. So it's not uncommon during the design process of any pair of sneakers that the product only gets named right at the end. So when the designers had a blank canvas ahead of them, they said, well, let's create a placeholder name for the project and let's call it randomly 3 letters. Let's call it the NMD, just as a placeholder before we find a better name in the future. So the name NMD was just a placeholder that actually meant nothing, as it normally takes place in the design. But just hold on, something else happened a bit later on. So in considering the consumer that the NMD was designed for, Adidas thought of somebody that is youthful, that is living in a city, and that is constantly on the move. I'm talking about someone that is constantly moving from studies to the place that they're working at, to the rehearsals that they need to attend, to maybe the sports club they need to join, to the club that they need to attend in the evening. But all of this taking place with the same pair of sneakers, something that is comfortable enough to transition between all of those things, and it's still a fit for that fast city living. So the idea was to create a technical runner that is actually a lifestyle sneaker. Do you get the brief? So what we're looking at right now is the Adidas NMD OG. And for those of you who are not too familiar with a lot of the lingo, when we refer to OG, we mean the original colorway of the product's release. So the NMD has come out in many different colors, many different upper applications, but this is the first one that ever went to market, the OG. And the first time I saw the OG, I looked at it with a sense of familiarity, with a sense of deja vu, as if I'd seen it before. Did I know somebody else who owned it? How come it rang familiar in the back of my mind? Now, that was actually part of Adidas's design process, because what they did was they chose 3 very iconic sneakers of the 80s and used components of it to create the NMD as we know it today. They used the Adidas Rising Star, the Micro Pacer, and the Boston Super in its construction. What I'm going to do is give you a brief summary of all of those 3 sneakers and how they form the NMD collectively. The first sneaker that we're discussing is the Rising Star. Although I don't have a physical sample of it, I've received images from Nigel Alexander from UK-based Classic Kicks. So check him out on Instagram, show him some love. Dude, thank you so much for sharing those images with us. What made the Rising Star unique was the fact that it came with these little wedges, interchangeable wedges, that you could shove into your midsole and change the density of the ride. If you were looking for something a bit more cushioned, or if you're looking for something that was a lot more stable, you could take these wedges, shove it in and take it back out. Now what you'll notice is that these wedges were not flushed with the midsole, so that you could actually grab hold of it and plug in the next one. Now when you have a look at the NMD, if you look at this red and this blue segment over here within the midsole, this looks like the Rising Star in the fact that it looks like an interchangeable wedge, just like that you would have seen on the Rising Star. So that is where the Rising Star's inspiration has come through, and this is not flushed with the midsole. It actually stands out as if you could manipulate it yourself. The second sneaker is the Boston Super. Now, it had three elements that it pulled through to the NMD immediately. On the upper, if you look at the image, you'll see that the Boston Super had those very unique eyelets for lacing. And as you can see, it is exactly the same eyelets that have been used on the NMD. Now, this color may not be the best in the way it shows up on camera, so I'm going to just swap back to the Bapes over here, and you can just have a look at how those eyelets looks exactly like what you've seen in the Boston Super. The next thing about the Boston Super is actually its outsole. So if you see its outsole, you'll notice that it has been modified to something that is a bit more street inspired when you have a look at the NMD's outsole. So Boston Super came through immediately in the outsole. And lastly, what made the Boston Super so unique was the fact that at the time it was quite cool to use color blocking in the way that the sneaker had been constructed. So the way that the colors had changed in the midsole, and the use of that color blocking is obviously quite visible in what this looks like at first glance. The last of the three sneakers we're discussing is the Micro Pacer. Now think about this. Today it's not uncommon to have a watch that tells you how many steps that you've taken, or a pair of sneakers that tells you the distance in which you ran. But in the year 1984, there were no satellites helping you out with all of this. But Adidas still creates the first smart shoe ever, the Micro Pacer. This shoe is able to tell you the distance you ran, the pace at which you ran, and also the amount of calories that you've burnt by the help of an onboard computer. I want to just show it to you a little bit closer so that you can actually see what it looks like. Very digital, very 80s, but that's just what the Micro Pacer was about. And this is a sneaker out of the private collection of Jason Vessels, who was kind enough to give Soul Knowledge access to one of these products. As a matter of fact, he's given us 2 Micro Pacers. His second one is a snakeskin application. Jay, these are so awesome, and thank you so much for sharing it with Soul Knowledge, my man. It really adds value and makes it good enough as an aid to explain to the folk the importance of these sneakers. The 2 elements that has been shared with the NMD from the Micro Pacer is first, this midsole component. The design has been exaggerated, as you can now see on this red section on the midsole. Same design feature on either side, both the lateral and the medial side shows off that exaggeration. But the second and most important thing is that the Micro Pacer delivers the sense of future, the sense of innovation that once stood so strong in '84. This sneaker has got Prime Knit in its upper, which is Adidas's most advanced upper, offering you no seams in anywhere in the construction, giving you minimal chafing. And also the midsole uses Adidas's Boost technology, which is also its most premium offering in the midsole cushioning space. So still delivering that future feel, but still talking into that 80s design and its inspiration from Rising Star, Micro Pacer and Boston Super. Now let me conclude. So in the beginning of the episode, I mentioned that they designed this for a consumer that was constantly on the move, constantly finding their inspiration in many places. And the same thing can be said for the sneaker. It moves between the 80s and the future constantly. Both the sneaker and the consumer is very nomadic in the way that it pulls its interpretation. With that thinking in mind, the more Adidas worked on this product, the more they understood the idea of this nomadic consumer and this nomadic product. Did they start to understand that NMD actually stood for nomad, constantly moving, constantly choosing its inspiration from many places. Lastly is this, another sneaker given to us by Jason Vessels, and this over here is the Adidas Firestarter. It is one of 300 pairs in the world, and its current resale market price is about $1,200 US. It's really special, and it is a really premium version of the NMD's execution. Thank you so much. I'm sure you guys have learned a lot from this one. It was a mouthful, but I'm glad you stuck around because your soul knowledge is 2 levels up as a result of this one. Stick around for one sneaker in 1 second. Lot of love.